Good afternoon, dear friends. Ruslan Belov here. Yesterday, the longest negotiations between the Russian and American delegations took place, lasting over 9 hours. There is no precise information yet, though various insider leaks in the Western press suggest that the Russian delegation insisted on Ukrainians withdrawing all their troops from Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Donetsk regions. But again, these are just reports from Western outlets. As for what really happened there, we'll likely find out closer to noon today, because Lavrov is set to give an interview. He'll provide the details then. Meanwhile, we continue to analyze the situation on the front lines. Let's open the map. So friends, I had planned to discuss other sectors of the front today, but unfortunately the situation in the Belgorod region is developing in a bad direction. That's why, for the second day in a row, I'm forced to focus on this area. I understand many don't like bad news. Some even start saying, "You're working for Ukraine," and so on. Let me be clear, I'm simply reporting what's happening, both the good and the bad. That way, you're aware of all the successes and setbacks on the front. And today's update will include both. Let's start with the difficult sector, Belgorod. Yesterday, I told you that Ukrainian armed forces attacked Demidovka, but were repelled after entering the southern part of the village. I warned that assaults would continue, and that's exactly what happened. The build-up of Ukrainian forces in the tree lines south of Demidovka made itself known. By midday, they launched another meat-grinder assault, literally overwhelming positions with sheer numbers. This time, our forces couldn't hold the line because the Ukrainian side had roughly a 5-to-1 numerical advantage. As a result, the Ukrainian armed forces began infiltrating the village, and by evening, control over Demidovka was lost. I even posted a video on my Telegram channel, check the link in the description, where you can see UAF assault troops moving through the village. In short, after over a week of battering against a solid defensive wall, the Ukrainians finally breached it. But at a heavy cost, they lost nearly 300 soldiers killed, even more wounded, and a significant amount of equipment. At least 9 tanks, almost 20 armored vehicles, not to mention regular transport vehicles. As of this morning, Demidovka is no longer under Russian control. It's hard to say whether the UAF has undisputed control, so for now we'll classify it as a grey zone, though American maps already mark it as Ukrainian held. But the difficulties didn't end there. Yesterday, the UAF also launched an offensive in another part of the Belgorod region, the village of Popovka. This sector wasn't active until yesterday morning. The attacks began after Russian forces withdrew from Demidovka, effectively putting Popovka in a semi-encirclement. Now they're trying to cut it off completely and force the garrison to retreat eastward. As of this morning, the village remains under Russian control, but heavy fighting continues on its outskirts. So why is the UAF attacking here? Why are Ukrainian forces expending disproportionate effort for minimal gains in the Belgorod region? Who in their right mind would sacrifice an entire battalion and dozens of destroyed vehicles just for one village? Well, the UAF did. The goal is to delay a potential large-scale offensive by Russian forces from Kursk into Sumy Oblast. I'm talking about a full-fledged assault, not the creeping advances we're seeing now. I've already told you, there won't be a major offensive until Kursk Oblast is fully secured. That's why the UAF is trying to divert Russian resources away from Kursk. There are even reports that some units had to be redeployed to Belgorod to prevent a collapse, and so far they've succeeded. Let me reiterate, after a week of brutal fighting, the UAF has only managed to gain shaky control over a single border village. That's it. So no need for panic or wild theories about Kursk 2.0. That's nonsense for gullible people. How much Ukrainian-held territory is there in Kursk Oblast after a week? Let me show you. Switching to this map, we'll rewind to August, specifically the 13th, 1 week after the incursion. What do we see? By that point, all this territory was under UAF control, with a penetration depth of about 25 kilometers. Now, just 2 kilometers, and only in the Demidovka sector. Everywhere else, it's 1 to 1.5 kilometers. In Kursk Oblast, the UAF captured 27 villages in a week. In Belgorod, 1. So again, don't fall for Ukrainian propaganda about Kursk 2.0. Everything's terrible, "Oh no, the UAF is back on your territory, it'll be like Kursk all over again." That's completely detached from reality. Back then they seized vast territory. Here, a tiny strip of land, barely a kilometer or two deep along the border. And only in one spot did they take a single village, which by the way is literally right on the border, just 1 to 1.2 kilometers away. The situations are completely different, and so are the results. The fact is, in Belgorod, the defense is holding and not collapsing. Russian army's successes in Kursk and other fronts. At the same time, the Russian army is also making progress, particularly in Kursk Oblast. I already mentioned this yesterday, and now there's confirmation. Russian troops have reached the Sudza checkpoint. Here's where it's located. At first glance, you might think, so what? They took a checkpoint, big deal. But in reality, this is extremely significant news. First, it means the entire highway is now under full physical control. Second, in the very near future, this pocket between the highway and Basovka will be cleared. Ukrainian forces have already been pushed out, including from the southern outskirts of the village. So, effectively, Basovka is now fully under Russian control, and the advance is moving toward Yunukovka. Third, there will soon be a push toward the northern outskirts of Oleshnya. I even have information from a local source that this maneuver has already been carried out. This means the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, won't be able to hold on to Oleshnya much longer. Within a day or two, 3 at most, you'll hear news of its liberation. And the liberation of Oleshnya will mean the entire northern part of this bridgehead will cease to exist, leaving only a 30-square-kilometer southern pocket. That's the current situation. Good news from another sector, Toretsk's western flank. There's also positive news from another area, the western flank near Toretsk. Yesterday, a previously stagnant sector suddenly came to life. I'm talking about this area here. What happened? Russian forces drove the UAF out of Alexandropol in a single strike and even managed to gain a foothold in Panteleimonovka. There are already reports that Panteleimonovka has also been taken, though this still needs confirmation. But Alexandropol is definitely under Russian control now. Now, the UAF command has a dilemma. Either keep trying to counterattack in Toretsk, where their gains have already been nullified, or abandon that effort and redeploy forces to stabilize this pocket. For the Russian troops, the objective is to reach this road running through Sukhaya Balka. If successful, they could significantly shrink the entire pocket. Summary: progress continues. Yes, there are some difficulties in certain sectors, but they're not critical, so don't lose heart. Once again, the Russian army is moving forward. Just in March alone, the Russian armed forces have taken control of over 200 square kilometers, and that's not even counting Kursk Oblast. Including Kursk, nearly 550 square kilometers have been secured in less than a month, and March isn't even over yet. Meanwhile, the UAF has managed to seize only about 12 square kilometers in March. See the difference between 550 and 12. So once again, no reason for despair. A few words on politics. Donald Trump's diplomatic offensive on all fronts has so far failed to yield tangible results. The Gaza ceasefire has collapsed. Ukraine peace talks are stalling. A military operation against Yemen's Houthis had to be launched. Iran remains unyielding. As a result, the Trump administration desperately needs a quick win. Otherwise, domestic opponents will start gaining momentum. Greenland might become that win. Denmark, which currently controls it, looks like the weakest link. The US could easily secure Greenland's independence from Denmark. Nearly all Greenlandic political forces want this. However, not everyone on the island wants to join the United States. Undeterred, the Trump team is ramping up diplomatic pressure on Greenland. Vice President Vance has sent his wife, along with Trump's national security advisor Mike Waltz, to lobby local organizations. Greenland's prime minister is protesting, but it's futile. He likely won't dare ban the US delegation. Denmark's PM Mette Frederiksen is acting strangely. While the US is trying to take a huge chunk of her country's territory, she insists on seeing Russia, which has no territorial claims against Denmark, as the enemy. Will Greenland become Trump's first major foreign policy success? Quite possibly. Will this trigger a crisis in US-Danish relations? Unlikely. At most, a temporary chill. Can the European Union defend Denmark's interests in Greenland? Number expect nothing beyond indignant statements. Thus, Donald Trump faces a green light on Greenland, illuminated by Danish and pan-European political impotence. Riyadh talks, no breakthrough, but dialogue continues. The key takeaway from the marathon negotiations in Riyadh: no agreement, but a commitment to keep talking. This conclusion aligns with the parties' public statements and the absence of a joint communiqué. Strictly speaking, the meetings in Saudi Arabia's capital were technical working group consultations, not high-level political talks. Formal negotiations will occur later and at a higher level. Russian delegation members are returning to Moscow today to brief the president. Their US counterparts have revisited Ukrainian officials remaining in Riyadh to share details of their discussions with Russia. For now, all sides officially hold their original positions, and no breakthroughs should be expected. The phase of hard-nosed diplomatic bargaining has begun, a process rarely resolved quickly. The core sticking point. The primary obstacle appears to be Moscow's condition for a permanent ceasefire, withdrawal of Ukrainian forces beyond Russia's constitutional borders, relinquishing Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. This demand was first articulated by Vladimir Putin in June 2023 and indirectly referenced in Stephen Witkoff's recent interview with Tucker Carlson, Witkoff being Trump's special envoy. No resolution exists yet, and the issue may ultimately be decided on the battlefield in 2025, if the Russian military can achieve this objective. Meanwhile, prospects for a new grain deal alternative, e.g. a Black Sea safe shipping initiative, appear slightly more tangible. But the critical question remains: what will Russia gain in return? For now, that door stays firmly shut. Frontline wrap-up. That's all for today's situational update. Wishing you a productive day. Until next time.